It turned out that he is the strongest exorcist who saved the girl who became his wife 2 years ago. In Japan, there was a large-scale disaster in which many people died, including those close to Rokuro, a young guy who was considered one of the strongest exorcists. Now Rokuro has grown up and is trying to start relationships with different girls from his school, but they all refuse him, considering him a freak and a pervert. After another refusal, he runs away from shame and stumbles upon Mayu and her huge. Roku asks Mayu does he ever have a chance to underscore someone, but I know his best friend, and honestly answers that the Pope from the Vatican has a better chance than him. Meanwhile, Blue Saja, a girl named Ben, is riding on a train when suddenly the lights in the carriage go out. Passengers don't understand what is happening when a flock of little demons flies through the window, causing panic, and Ben sits calmly in his place. People outside look at the train, which seems to be swallowed up by darkness. Ben finally gets up and shows off his hips before get one of the magic talismans. Then she decides to use it to open a portal, and soon they are transported to a post-apocalyptic world that seems to be captured by monsters and completely destroy. All the demons enter the train through the window, and she puts on a mask and prepares for battle. She takes out the sword and begins to chop down the demons one by one. But suddenly one of the largest demons stands in front of her and begins to devour small demons, and other monsters attack her from behind. She manages to kill most of the demons. But then why did the big demon turn into something huge and scary? The demon attacks her, but she dodges and deliberately falls from the bridge, takes out another talisman and uses it to escape. But before she can land, the monster grabs her and takes her into the sky, and her armor begins to collapse. She quickly takes out the talisman and frees herself from the demon's grip, takes out another talisman and explodes herself, piercing the demon through and killing him. But before she can rejoice, she loses consciousness from fatigue after fighting with so many demons and falls down. Meanwhile, Roku stands calmly on the bridge thinking about his life when suddenly a portal opens above him, and from there Bani falls right in front of him. The next second he instinctively jumps from the bridge and catches her before they both fall into the water. Somehow he pulls them both out of the water and breathes heavily, and then notices Benio, who is trying to act like nothing happened. She takes out a piece of paper and looks confused. Afterwards approaches Roku and gives him a piece of paper. He looks at the parchment and realizes that it is a poorly drawn map with a star. He asks if she wants to come closer to the star, and when she agrees, he starts showing her the way. He tries to start a conversation, but Bioni answers and ignores him. Soon they both get lost, and Roku buys her food because she is hungry and lost because of him. In the end, Roku gets very angry with her but leads her along when they notice two children playing with each other. Suddenly, the darkness thickens around them, and they hear screams. And when they turn around, they see that the children have disappeared. Bioquintiagi is in the destroyed world. Roku opens his eyes and sees that the world is destroyed, and the wounded boy tells his sister to run because a monster is approaching them. The monster was already going to eat them, but Bio stuck two swords into him, ran up to him, and cut off his head. Roku realizes that she is also a strong exorcist, puts away the swords, and goes to the children to make sure that they are safe. Suddenly, a monster comes out of the ground behind her, and soon they are surrounded by demons called Kilogram. Roku in horror watches as his hands shake with fear and anger because of what happened 2 years ago. Biu doesn't seem to care. She takes out several talismans and puts buffs on herself to become faster and stronger. When she puts on the talismans, they begin to glow, and she quickly takes her sword and uses one of her strongest attacks. She fights all the demons around them with speed lightning and begins to chop them down one by one without stopping for a second, while Roku watches her in amazement, unable to believe that women can be so strong and independent. She continues to chop down the enemies, and soon they all fly into pieces and die. Then she approaches the wounded boy lying on the ground and tells his sister not to worry, takes out another talisman from her pocket and puts it on the boy before casting the spell. The boy wakes up and thanks Bani. Roku approaches her and praises her for her incredible strength and endurance. She asks why the hell he is here, and he replies that she brought him here. But before they can leave, the ground beneath them suddenly begins to shake and crack, and a giant Australian spider demon appears ready to kill him. Den tells Roku to take the children to a safe place while she deals with the Australian spider, and Roku immediately takes the children away. Ben gets ready and jumps on the spider, but as soon as she tries to hit him on the head, she is thrown to the ground. Roku immediately runs up to her to make sure that she is okay, as she understands that they need to somehow distract the demon if they want to save the children. She gives Roku one of her talismans and tells him to take his brothers and sister and return to the real world. While the spider is approaching them, he asks what she is going to do, and she replies that she will defeat Australia no matter what, that because America is always number one. Roku tells her that she should run with him, but she replies that she is not like him because she is an exorcist whose job is to destroy these creatures. She goes down to the monster and swings her sword in preparation for an attack and then flies over the ground right to his head. Unfortunately, the monster is very thick and strong, so the attack does not bring much result. She falls to the ground and decides to use her special attack, striking from all sides while Roku watches from above. Understanding that she can't continue at the same pace, her armor begins to fall apart when she runs into the demon again and again, and he tries to attack her and she barely manages to block the blows because the armor is completely falling apart. She decides to buy some time and uses an incredibly powerful attack that throws the demon to the wall, but she loses her breath and bleeds from her wounds. Her stamina is running out, as is the protective spell, so she tries to find more talismans. She realizes that she has used everything, and then when she already thinking that it's all over, Roku appears in front of her, which surprises her very much because he was supposed to leave with the children. She tells him to run, but he tells her to shut up and look at the power of a real man. He immediately takes out the talisman and heads towards the monster, remembering the disaster that happened 2 years ago when he could not protect anyone. Finally, he gathers his courage and uses the talisman, which immediately begins to glow and catches fire before he channels his energy with magic and turns it into a huge red glove. Dino can't believe that this exorcist guy with such incredible power. Roku confidently stands in front of the demon and challenges him, and then flies into the air and delivers a blow that even Mike Tyson would be proud of. This single blow completely destroys the demon, and Bino looks at it in disbelief that this guy defeated the Australian spider with one blow. She comes up to him and says that she has never seen such power before, but Roku looks at and replies that it is not power, but a curse. She looks at him with admiration, and he lowers his eyes and says that she should forget about what happened here because he doesn't want to be such a pathetic exorcist. She gets angry at him and steps on his foot and then takes out another talisman and opens a portal back to the ordinary world. When they return, they stand on the ground and argue, and Bino says that she didn't need his help and she could have dealt with the demon herself because she boss. Roku doesn't believe that girls should come out of the kitchen and says that she would have lost to the demon if he hadn't intervened. He gets angry and leaves, and Benno says that they will see each other soon, and then Rocky walks through the dark alleys and suddenly realizes that he lost his bag. When he tried to save Benno, he decides to buy her something to drink to calm down, but all the money is also gone because of which he bought her in the hope of something more, and this infuriates him even more. Later that night, he returns to the dorm with his bag and sees that Benno is sitting in the room where she is fed and looked after by her owner and his friends. He gets angry, but his friend says that Benno joined them as an exorcist and will live here with them. They both look at each other, and suddenly a small fiery creature appears and jumps on Rocky, telling him he was cleaning it, introduces himself like a movie familiar Bino. Rocky yells them to get out and goes back to his room to sleep. The next morning, Benno will be him putting a handkerchief in his nose and covering his mouth. He is shocked that she is in his room and asks what the hell does she want so early in the morning, and she replies that yesterday's power was amazing and she wants him to go with her into the portal and see which of them is stronger. Rocky immediately refuses, saying that he doesn't want to go into the portal. She approaches him and threatens to cut off his balls, but he still refuses and kicks her out of the room along with Kino, shouting that yesterday's victory was an accident and that he never wants to be an exorcist again. She is standing in the corridor and she notices her mentor and asks if his grief has appeared. Soon the four of them pass through the portal and see a huge monster in the distance. The elders immediately back up, but Benio looks like she is not herself. She runs straight to the monster, puts on a mask and dodges his attacks, taking out talismans and putting on enchanted armor. She jumps, dodging attacks, and climbs up the monster's arm until she gets to his head. Then she takes out her ethereal swords and is already going to kill the demon, but he tries to hit her. Fortunately, she blocks the attack and cuts off his hand, and the elders look at her with admiration. She begins to chop the demon, but she understands that he is much weaker than the Australian spider whom Roku killed with one blow. Then she remembers the promise she made to her brother to become the most powerful exorcist and thinks about Roku who is standing in front of her. She is much weaker than him but still delivers the final blow and is alone with the demon. After that, they return to the ordinary world where the mentor asks if Roku fought a demon in front of her eyes and she replies that he defeated one of the most powerful demons she has seen. They get into the car and start talking. The elder says that Roku ended up in this dorm 2 years ago after something terrible happened to him, and since then he has stopped being an exorcist. Meanwhile, Roku gets bored and decides to take a bath, but when Banyat comes out of the shower he opens the door. Banyat ends up chasing him around the dorm with a sword in his hand, and Roku runs out into the street and runs into a blue-haired man who is only wearing panties. Roku asks the squee if he is some kind of PDF file at their teacher. Immediately orders him to apologize, claiming that this guy is the head of all exorcists named Arima. They all go inside, and Arima excitedly reports that he has wonderful news. He orders the old man to gather all his students and meet him at the temple. The old man, along with all the students, approaches the temple and the teacher simply moves him away from the secret door. As soon as they go down, they find themselves in a huge cave full of exorcists who immediately surround Bean and ask how she is doing. Meanwhile, Arima finally appears upstairs and tells them all to listen carefully. He explains that the oracle appeared in front of him and said that there was a long war between Exorcist and Kyger is coming to an end thanks to the appearance of a child of God who will be called Makika. According to him, this exorcist will become a legend with a power that they cannot imagine and will destroy all the demons and finally bring peace. Everyone is looking forward to when these people will be announced. And finally Arima calls Beni to the stage. Everyone thinks that Benio is a legendary exorcist, but Arima says that there is another person and calls Roku. He is shocked, but his older comrades push him onto the stage. Roku says about Rome that he was mistaken, but he ignores him and announces to everyone that Benio is the strongest exorcist in all of Western Japan, and Roku is the strongest in Eastern Japan. Everyone is shocked to see Roku after all. They have never heard his name, but Arima calms them down and says that soon both exorcists will demonstrate their skills, and then adds that they need to fight each other with full strength with the intention of killing. Roku gets angry and says that he will not do this, but Arima replies that he has no choice, and Benio seems to be ready with a dagger at the ready. She immediately rushes at him and tries to hit him, but Roku quickly dodges, saying that he doesn't want to have anything to do with the exorcist. Benio doesn't pay attention and again rushes at him with a dagger, but Roku deftly dodges and retreats, continues to back away, and she chases him and even slightly touches his clothes with a dagger, but Roku refuses to engage in battle and dodges, trying to get out of the way again and again. She tells him to use all his strength, but he refuses and Beni knocks him down with a kick. Everyone starts laughing at Roku and Arima sits down and tells Beni to try even harder, provoking Roku and saying that his friends died because of his weakness. He insults his friends who grew up with him and die by calling them worthless workers, and this was the last straw when Ralu takes out a talisman and turns his hand into flaming ones. He immediately rushes at Ari with a furious scream, but Benio attacks him again, forcing him to retreat. Then she takes out another talisman and enchants her sword before attacking, but Roku is a tough guy who just fights her off the sword and she flies off to the columns. She falls to her knees and Roku goes to Karima as she asks him to stop claiming that she will defeat him and become the most powerful exorcist. He tells her to shut up, but she continues to talk and this enrages him, and he launches several fireballs at her, which she barely manages to block and deflect with her swords. Roku takes advantage of this and rushes at her to finish the fight, but Beni releases all his energy, pushing Roku away, and then jumps into laughing at Roku, and Arima sits down and tells Beni to try even harder, provoking Roku and saying that his friends died because of his weakness. He insults his friends who grew up with him and die, calling them dark workers, and this was the last straw when Ralu takes out the talisman and turns his hand into a flaming one at Ari with a furious scream. Benio attacks him again, forcing him to retreat. Then she takes out another talisman and enchants her sword before attacking, but Roku is a tough guy who just knocks her sword away and she flies to the pillars. She falls to his knees and Roku goes to Karima, but she asks him to stop claiming that she will defeat him and become the most powerful exorcist. He tells her to shut up, but she continues to talk and this on Jaehyun, and he launches several fireballs at her, which she barely manages to block and deflect with her swords. Roku takes advantage of this and rushes at her to end the fight. But Benny releases all his energy, pushing Roku away, and then jumps into the air and delivers a powerful blow that makes him fall to the ground. He again rises, but Benio continues to attack him with lightning speed, and he doesn't even see her. Roku gets angry and hits the ground, which causes a cloud of smoke to rise, but Benio doesn't let him come to his senses and attacks again. This time Roku is ready and was about to hit her. But Arima uses a magical talisman to neutralize their magic and they both fall to the ground. Arima approaches Benio and bows to Roku, apologizing for insulting her. His friend Zan says that he only did this to test his strength. He then turns to the crowd and says that these two exorcists are the famous twins who are spoken of in the prophecy. According to the oracle of them, the child will be known as Maiko, who will end the Kegger and lead us to peace. In other words, he tells them that they should get married and have a child. After yesterday's fight, everything was very awkward, and Roku doesn't even look at Benny. Suddenly Shin and Itsuki come into the kitchen. Seniors in rank and start teasing them, but Benio gets angry and says that he will never marry someone who doesn't even want to be an exorcist and leaves. Shin and Itsuki tell Roku that yesterday he was cool when Ryo comes and says that they need to go to exorcism, and Roku says that he should take care of Benny because from today she will study at the same school. Roku goes to school, sits down in his seat, and decides who he will choose. Mayu when the teacher announces that a new one will join them. Student and Benny. Roku enters the class and gets angry, realizing that Arima is behind this, and the teacher asks her to sit between Roku and Mayu. Meanwhile, the three elders pass through the portal and sees that a whole crowd of Kaguryo is waiting for them. Ryo immediately takes out his dagger and enchants it, and then they begin to chop the demons one by one, preparing to destroy any Kigurumi. Meanwhile, at the academy, Mayu asks Roku if he has seen Ben and sends him to search for Ben. In turn, sits on terrace and enjoying a meal alone, when suddenly he feels the presence of a very strong Kigi. Ryo tells Itsuki and Shin that they have to deal with these demons themselves because he doesn't want to endanger Roku or Binbin. In turn, packs up his things and is about to leave, but Roku stops her. She tells him that a strong Gura has appeared in the city and that the elders may be in danger. Roku refuses to go, but Ben immediately goes to help inside the portal. The elders have a hard time because Suki and Shin have almost no strength left and Ryo barely has a drop of energy left to protect them. Fortunately, Ben appears on the roof of the house and tells them to retreat while she puts on a mask and prepares for battle. She immediately puts on her armor and uses the remaining talisman to enchant her swords before preparing for battle. The elders are amazed at her ability to use so many spells at the same time, and Dino crouches and rushes at the giant demon. She instantly cuts the demon with incredible speed, which shocks everyone, but the Kiger is very strong and throws her back and another Kiger appears from behind. Ryo immediately copes with it and says that they will deal with the little ones while she fights the big one. The giant Kiger turns out to be too strong for her and she creates a small portal that damages one of the carousels in the amusement park. Luckily Roku passes and immediately rushes to save the children, and Benny uses one of his special attacks to deliver many quick blows to push the demon away, and then flies up into the sky and uses his special technique to cut the demon in half, completely destroying it, while the elders watch in admiration. This in the real world, Roku climbs onto the carousel and goes to the children telling them to hold on to him because the carousel is about to fall. One of the children grabs him and saves himself, but the other is too scared and the carousel begins to lose his balance. Roku remembers his friends and tells Obo to trust him and jump, and manages to grab his hand right before the carousel falls. After rescuing the children, he fumbles to the dormitory where Benno is waiting for him, and the elders. Benno notices the dirt on Roku's clothes and asks what happened, but Roku says nothing and then asks how the exorcism went. Benno replies that everything went fine and they go inside to get a good night's sleep. The next morning Ryo invites everyone to a meeting and says that the elders will go to submit their reports on the exile and then we will go to some exorcisms. He asks what Ben is going to do and she replies that he will clean his swords and then prepare for the exams. Roku says that they will just rest. Ryo advises him to study more. Roku it is annoying and he leaves to get some fresh air. Meanwhile, Ryo and the others go to the city from handing in reports, and then go to an old house where they need to practice. He reads about the history of this house and finds out that its first owners died, and their son rented out the house. Since then 11 people have gone missing and no one else has seen them. Rio tells them to split up and check each room, but be very careful. They go inside and separate, but do not feel here, and nevertheless, to make sure they clear each room. Finally, they enter the last room, and immediately feel the presence of evil. They take out their weapons and look around carefully, but suddenly begin to feel intense fear. Their bodies freeze and tremble. They tell Rio that they want to leave immediately, but Rio tells them to gather their courage and opens a portal. They find themselves face to face with a giant two-headed Kigmo who immediately attacks Otsuka's tires, pinning them to the wall. By the time they come to their senses and look around, Rio and the monster have already disappeared. They quickly return home and find Roku, who he also just arrived. They say that Rio was taken into the portal and there was a guy waiting for him. This really scared Roku and he ran into Benio's room, which was sorting out her talismans. He asked her for help, but Benio didn't answer. When he saw this, he shouted out her name and immediately fell to the floor, bowing in front of her, begging her to help him return Rio. Benio understands the seriousness of the situation and says that he must gather his courage because he is an exorcist and should not ask anyone for help. Thanks her and they begin to prepare. Meanwhile, Rio is running through the streets, wounded and exhausted, hiding in dark alleys and trying to escape from a huge Kagura who haunts him more than my ex is chasing me. He falls from fatigue to the ground and realizes that he no longer has talismans to get out of this hell. Suddenly he raises his head and sees a monster that looks exactly like my ex without makeup, and the monster throws him aside like a fly. Before he can come to his senses, the monster attacks again and hits his tentacle on the leg and then rises up in the air. Rio immediately cuts off the tentacle and falls, but the monster again throws him into a building and then smashes everything around and throws him again. Rio spits out blood. He has almost no strength left. He looks back and sees that a flock of small tigers have gathered around him and are trying to finish him off. Rio realizes that there is no exit and he will die anyway. He sits down again and raises his sword to try to kill at least one monster before he dies, but his spell dissipates and the sword becomes normal. He seems to have accepted his defeat when Kagura approaches to finish him off, but Rio uses his energy for the last time and pierces the monster's eye with his limp sword. The monster doesn't pay attention to this and grabs Rio, about to imprison him, but then out of nowhere Roku appears and knocks out the demon with one blow. He immediately checks Rio's condition but sees that he is in a very bad condition. This makes him furious because Rio is like an older brother to him. Suddenly, the monster appears behind him, but Roku quickly strikes and small demons surround them. Rio says he should leave if he wants to survive, but Roku replies that he can handle it, and soon a lightning attack destroys all the demons in the area, and Ben uses his special attack to kill all the small demons at once, but their victory was short-lived because the giant Kajira rises again within and several small monsters. Roku tells Rio to stay back while he deals with them. Unfortunately, he is not as fast as Ben and soon he is surrounded, but Ben again comes to the rescue and destroys all the monsters in her path. Then she turns to the biggest one, but Roku tells her to stay back because this demon is his prey. He jumps into the air, dodges his attacks, and then delivers an incredibly powerful punch straight to the demon's face, instantly destroying him. Minho quickly deals with the remaining ones and Roku runs up to Rio to check on him. Then he picks him up and they all return to the dorm together, where Shing and Otsuki are happy to see them. Later that day, Benio returns to the haunted house and completely cleans it out. When she comes out, she sees Roku, who is sitting alone. She asks what he is doing here and he immediately bows thanks to her for helping him save Rio. She tells him to stand up and then says that he looks good when he fights and immediately insults him, calling him stupid and worthless, and they fight again. The next morning, Roku goes to the hospital to check on Rio, who is lying there until he regains his strength. Roku brings him a bunch of sweets and snacks and then leaves, goes outside, and thinks if he has what it takes to become an exorcist. When he returns home, he sees that everyone is in the room, looks at Bani, who is writing talismans in her perfect handwriting. They start teasing Roku for his terrible handwriting and he decides to prove that they are wrong, but in the end he only exposes himself to ridicule because he cannot write a single working talisman because of his terrible handwriting. They were still laughing at him when suddenly The old master ran into their room and shouted what was inside the town's notice to huge number of Shin heroes, and Itsuki got scared because Ryo was their leader and the strongest member of the team. But Benio said that she would take command and organized everything, even asked Roku if he wanted to go with them. They all got into the van, including Roku, who said that he just wanted to watch and would not participate in the Shin battle, turned around and handed Roku the talisman, saying that Ryo made it himself and that Roku would have it if he ever fell into the portal again. Roku took it with a smile, and then they arrived at the elementary school. They rushed inside and saw a frightened teacher who said that all the children from his group suddenly disappeared. Danny did not wait and immediately opened the portal and then jumped there along with the rest of the children. They were chased by the Kaiger and they were trapped. And one of them was grabbed by a demon and was going to be devoured if it weren't for Roku, who rushed at him and saved his life. But he didn't have time to make sure that they were safe when another Kagura grabbed the child and was about to destroy him, and Roku looked on helplessly. But Benio intervened and destroyed the demon. Then she used her hacking skills and began to destroy all the opponents in her path, but even after that, there were many Kaiger who were waiting for the opportunity to devour the children. Roku tells Ben to move away and takes a handful of stones, throws them into the air and tries to shoot them like bullets, but he can't because he forgot to use his talisman. He takes out his talisman and quickly uses it, then again burnt the pebbles and shoots them like bullets into a pile of Kigen ant. Itsuki gather the children, make sure that no one is hurt, and prepare to return through the portal, but a huge number of Kaigers run towards them. Bean uses his spinbow again and starts destroying them, and Roku uses his ninja technique to turn into a shooter and shoot a bunch of monsters. Shinitsuki takes out a talisman to open the portal, but suddenly a monster appears and throws Shin away and then attacks Otsuki, injuring them both. Roku realizes that this could be dangerous for the children and remembers his old friends. Otsuki is not one of those who give up and gets up again to destroy the demon in front of him with his spear. And Shin finally opens the portal. The children immediately run through it to the safe place and Roku sighs in relief, but suddenly a Kaiger appears from behind and grabs him, trying to eat. Fortunately, a powerful ray of light hits the monsters, throws the rock away, and then crashes into the wall. From a huge cloud of smoke, a red-haired man appears who looks very strong. He's immediately surrounded by the Kaiger, but he simply takes out a dagger and with the help of his talisman turns it into a flaming sword and then plunges it into the ground. The Kaiger rush at him, but he simply casts a spell that creates a huge fire hurricane around him, destroying all the Kaiger. As soon as they approach him, Roku and his team are stunned by such power, and the guy casually puts the sword in his bag and walks up to them. Roku immediately rushes at him, but Bainey comes up and asks, "What the hell is he doing here?" It turns out the guy's name is Shiman, and he is one of the 12 guardians who should be an exorcist who knows magic, martial arts, critical thinking, and tactics. Shin and Itsuki are shocked to see a real guardian in the flesh, and Shimon turns to then man asks who is Marmot. They direct him to Kroku, but he looks disappointed and punches him in the face. He then walks up to him and says that he got distracted during the fight, which could have killed him and also endangered the people from his team. He turns to Bainey, claiming that having such a loser as Rock as his twin star must be tiring, and she replies that it is because he is stupid and lazy. Before they can continue the conversation, a giant ear appears from underground and eats several other demons, turning into a giant. He hits the gorilla with his fist on the ground, and from this blow towards our hero Ina, that they manage to dodge except Tires and Otsuka, who fall to the ground unconscious. Roku is terrified and worried about them. He turns to the monster in a blind rage. The shaman thinks that Roku is a weakling and tries to cope with the Kaiger himself, but Benya stops him and says that he might get hurt if he gets in the way of the lesson. Roku approaches the demon and takes out his talisman before put on the glove. Then he charges him with his magic, and when the Kaiger tries to hit him, Roku hits him back, blocking his attack. A small skirmish occurs, but soon Roku is overcome by the beast and with one blow completely destroys him. Shiman is surprised to see how much power this seemingly stupid guy has, and Roku is breathing heavily. All this was happening from the roof of the building. A mysterious figure was watching everything from the roof of the building, but as soon as Shiman sensed her presence, the figure disappeared before he can continue the investigation. Arima calls him and says that he is urgently needed at the headquarters, and although he tries to stay and continue the investigation, Arima calls him through the portal. Roku follows him because he wants to know more about him but falls to the ground from fatigue because he spent too much energy on one attack. Suddenly he notices that the entire team of children and their coach are standing in front of him and thanking him for saving their lives. Later that evening they return to the dorm to have dinner and Shin and Itsuki discuss how cool Shimon is. Rock seems jealous of his strength and turns to Benny asking when Shimon became one of the Guardians. She replies that he became one of them 2 years ago when he was 14 years old. Rock stands up in amazement because he is also 14 now, which means Shimon was stronger than him even 2 years ago. This gives him a goal to which he will strive, and he begins to smile thinking about that day when he can become stronger than Shimon. The next morning Bin and Oku go to school, but during lunch break Bio senses the presence of a Kiger nearby, so she immediately apologizes and leaves school early. Roku looks after her but decides not to follow her, and Mayu asks why he is so interested in her. Meanwhile Otsuki and Shin fight with several Kiger, especially but the big one who is approaching them. Luckily Vinyo appears in time and instantly destroys the demon, saying that Shisav will sort it out. The next morning she goes to school but is immediately stopped by Mayu, who asks if she wants to sit with her. Ben ignores her and leaves, but Mayu seems to be following her and tries to sit at the same desk with her during gym class and during lunch. Later, when she was about to leave, Mayu stops her again and says that he wants to be friends with her. Mayo tells her that she works in a dangerous environment and she doesn't need friends. Mayu thinks that she is some kind of yakuza, but before she can ask some more questions, Bean goes home. On the way, Wu catches up with her and tries to start a conversation, but he is immediately attacked by her familiar, who does not want her to communicate with this idiot. With a low IQ, Bean goes home again, and when they arrive they find out that Ru has been discharged from the hospital and they are having a party with pizza and everything else. They start talking again and Ryo declares that he, Shin, and Otsuki need to go to exorcism again tomorrow, and Yu immediately says that to everyone will go. Everyone was glad that everything is going well, but then Ru opens his mouth and declares that he would also like to go because Ryo is still weak after the last battles. Everyone is shocked and silent and Ru is embarrassed, so he says that he is just bored. Ryo immediately hugs him and says that he will be glad if Ru goes with them to the exorcism tomorrow. The next morning, Benio is preparing for training and the 3 older ones are already dressed. Suddenly Ru screams and runs downstairs, saying that today he overslept and they need to wait. They say that not need to worry and leave. Neo goes for a run, remembering that Ryo asks to let Ru do this because he wants to see how serious he is. While jogging, Mayu catches up with her again and says that she runs to lose weight, but Denio suddenly has a growl in his stomach and Mayu takes her with him. Meanwhile Roku is already fighting with all his might, quickly using his talisman to charge the stones with energy and then shoots them into a pile of Kiger, while Ryo Rock hopes a demon in a cube whom the others caught, but before they have time to celebrate the victory, even more Kiger appears from the ground and tries to surround Roku, but he immediately retreats to the rest. Ryo again takes the initiative and they all try to win together. Meanwhile, Mayu takes Bino to the restaurant and orders her favorite dish to make friends with her. But during the conversation, suddenly the whole restaurant shakes, the lights go out and Bino feels something dangerous. A giant Kiger appears in the portal, destroying everything on his way, and when Ryo tries to attack him, the demon simply throws him aside like a half-baked. They immediately try to create a barrier to catch the monster, but he easily destroys the talisman and attacks them again. Then Nan takes the blow, falling to the ground. Roku looks back and sees that his entire team is defeated, and this infuriates him. He approaches the kilogram and takes out his special talisman before using magic and putting on a fire glove. The KGR tries to hit him, but he easily dodges and hits him in the face, from which he immediately dies on the other side. Nio fights with the Kiger and saves the chef and then decides to return through the portal. As soon as she returns to the real world, Mayu hugs her and cries, saying that he was very scared for her. Den can't cope with these emotions, but hugs her back at last. Accepting her friendship, they return and Mayu tells Ben that she knows about the caster because her grandfather is the elder of one of the dorms. Den suddenly realizes that the elder is in their dorm and Mayu's grandfather. Mayu understands that this means that she lives with Roku and immediately runs back to the dorm. They find Roku and the others who just returned have tasks, but as Soon as Mayu sees Roku, she pounces on him and starts beating him for not telling her that he lived with Ben all this time. The next morning, Arima comes to the dorm in a beach shirt and shorts. He tells Anne and Roku that he has a special test for them and gets them into the car before driving off. Roku seems confused because he doesn't understand where the hell he's taking them. After all, they are going to the side residential areas. He tells them to shut up because they don't know anything about training. He then stops in front of a huge mansion, parks the car and goes inside. He says that it used to be his country house where he had sex many times and shows them the huge grounds, a beautiful swimming pool, a gym and finally a full-fledged training room, dimmed by the light, curtained with curtains and with a huge bed. He jumps on the bed showing what he was doing in this room and then tells Rock that now this is his and Bino's mansion and they need to learn to live together and love each other in order to quickly get laid and make up the baby. Maiko Roku is embarrassed and kicks Rima into the wall when the door opens and the old owner enters, declaring that everything has already been moved. Roku comes downstairs and sees that the movers have already laid everything out. Arima says to Rock that as the head of the exorcists, he must make sure that the prophecy will come true and that Roku will not die a virgin. After this, he takes Kina and leaves, saying that he will call them when they arrange it. After a while, Roku goes into his bedroom and immediately begins to worry, thinking that he will finally be able to feel the girls, and Bio in his room just looks around, decides that the bed is in the wrong place and moves it for some reason. She cannot move the bed, and then the room begins to tilt and they are forced press against the wall and the partition between their rooms opens. Suddenly the screen lights up and Arima tells them that this will be one of the tests and the only way to get out of this situation is to work together. He also states that any magic does not work here, so they will have to rely only on their physical abilities and work together to get out of here. When the screen disappears, Roku looks around and realizes that they will have to jump from one bed to another to get to the screwdriver with which they can open the vent and get out of there. Ben gets ready, but Roku asks her to wait until he jumps and tries to climb onto the first bed but slips and falls head first into the wall. Ben grins and elegantly jumps onto the bed and then holds out his hand to him so that he can climb too. In the end, he falls on her and for the first time in his life he smells the scent of a girl. Then Ambin helps him up and tells him to jump so she can set him up. Unfortunately, soon as Nio jumps, Roku closes his eyes and gets kneed in the face just like my ex, and she didn't want to make me a sandwich. They both fall and finally get up to get in line again, but then they get the same blow. This time Benio makes him concentrate and they successfully climb onto the last bed. After that, she quickly throws him a rope and he climbs it. Finally, they get to the screwdriver to open the ventilation. For this, they need to work together. Roku bends down and Benio climbs on his backhand, then he stands up so she can reach screwdriver. She quickly opens the ventilation and they both climb into the dark space and begin to move. Suddenly Otsuki calls Roku and shouts that they were attacked by Kagura and they need both Roku and Bani. They quickly move through the ventilation with a flashlight and finally get to screen on which it is written that if they want to go further they must answer the questions correctly, otherwise they will have to start over. Roku is angry with Ari, but Benio tells him to focus on the task. In the end, they think about the correct answer and Roku finally figures it out and gives the correct answer, opening the hatch below them, which leads to salvation. Mono immediately takes out his talisman to help the elders. Meanwhile, the elders have a hard time against Kagura Mantis, who drove them into a corner and was about to finish them off, but fortunately Roku manages in time and throws her aside with his flaming glove. Kagura becomes enraged and tries to strike him, but in time plunges his swords into his back. Demon Kiger begins to roll on the ground trying to throw her off of him, and Roku quickly climbs onto the building and tells her to move away, and he jumps on the monster and delivers a powerful blow that throws him aside, and then the monster falls to pieces. They all seem very happy when Roku notices that she is missing one of the hair ties. She immediately begins to panic and says that it is a gift from her brother and that it is very important to her. She begins to look for it in the dust, thinking that she lost it during the fight, but Roku grabs it and takes it back, where he quickly climbs into the ventilation shaft and takes out the Bainyat hair tie. From this, she turns red like a wet sponge. Later, they have dinner together and Bani was already getting ready to go to bed. When Roku asks her about her brother, she sits down and tells that they were twins and she always admired him because he was better than her in everything. He gave her these hair bands at the festival, but after their parents divorced, They also stopped communicating until one day she found out that her brother died protecting his friends during an exorcism. Roku calms her down and says that he doesn't even have parents and he became an exorcist only because he was raised since he can remember. This brings them even closer and they go to bed, but not in the same bed. The next morning, MJ comes to the mansion to meet with Roku because she just found out that he is here to have sex and nothing else. He quickly clears the situation by saying that he wants nothing to do with it and that the head of the exorcists, Arima, forced them. May returns to Roku and asks why he is doing this and asks him not to do this anymore. Roku replies that he has already become an exorcist. She yells at him that she does not want to see him in this state again because it hurts her more, and he can imagine Benio suddenly intervenes saying that the lesson has incredible power and that this power helps save several people, including her, who might have died if it weren't for him. Mayu insists, saying that what's the point in this if he himself dies. Roku thanks her for thinking about him and says that he became an exorcist again when he found out what happened to him, that if he can save at least one life, it will be worth it. Mayu begins to cry and leaves the house sadly, returning to herself, remembering how she found him by the river crying, and burns the talismans because he was unable to save his friends on the way. She suddenly notices the girl's reflection in the mirror but turns around and sees no one. She thinks that she is hallucinating and continues to walk. Meanwhile, in Ken's mansion, she brings lunch for Bio and suddenly notices a green talisman for good luck, which Rock claims belongs to Mei because she has worn it since childhood. Mommy immediately understands that this is a talisman and tells Rock that she needs to return it to NJ because he hid her magic from Kaider, protecting her from attacks. Roku gets scared and immediately runs after NJ. While NJ is walking, she suddenly feels like she's been grabbed again, turns around but doesn't see anyone, and then looks in the mirror and sees that she's being held by some dirty girl. NJ is too stunned to say anything when suddenly the girl smiles creepily and drags her into another world. She wakes up in a completely different place surrounded by a red wasteland and is very scared. She looks back and sees a little girl laughing like crazy with red eyes and then turns into a giant half-octopus Kagura. He grabs NJ with tentacles, and it reminds me of the video with tentacles that I watched at night, and then presses her to his chest where several more kilograms are waiting for her, ready to devour her. She begins to cry, hoping that someone will take her, will save her. But then Roku appears and hits the monster in the face with all his might. From the blow, the demon lets her go and Roku immediately picks her up, asking if everything is okay with her. He says that he will save her and she loses consciousness from fatigue. He lowers her to the ground and turns to the monster, ready to teach him a lesson, and he stands in front of him, straightened up to his full height. Suddenly Bani appears and says that he must help Mei while she is fighting this Kaiger, but he refuses because he wants to kill him. They themselves begin to attack his Rakan, deals strong blows and tries to cut him into pieces. To their surprise, this Kaiger is much stronger than everyone they have encountered before. They don't have time to come up with a plan when suddenly the Kaiger is pierced by several magical blows and he dies in a couple of seconds right before their eyes, and in his place a sleepy guy appears and says that this should have been an easy task for them. He approaches Mei to make sure that she is not dead and then turns to Rockwell and asks how he is doing while he is shaking on the spot. He turns out to be this. The guy's name is Skin and he is also one of the 12 Guardians. In addition, he's Mayu's father and Raku's mentor in Irio. He taught them everything. Rakan tries to persuade him, but Scan does not listen and begins to punish him, and Benio watches this. Then he grabs Raku by the hand and says that Arima told him about his return to exorcism and asks if he really wants to become an exorcist again. Rakan lowers his gaze and says that he no longer wants to be the strongest and does not care about prophecies. I can't let the people around him get hurt. Skin slaps him in the face and Roku falls to the ground, and Skin says that everything that Roku says is idealistic nonsense that no one cares about. But Roku gets up and says that he really thinks so. Hearing this, Skin comes up to him and challenges him to a fight to find out if the lesson has the courage and skills. Roku seems not to mind, but Skin continues to say that he will not hold back, so it would be better if Roku attacked him with the intention of killing. The battle begins and Skin takes out a talisman and creates stone bullets with which he shoots at Roku, who barely dodges each attack. This is very similar to Roku's attack. But Banya understands that the magic and attack power of Skon are incomparable. A huge stone bullet to crush Skon. But he shows that the size does not matter and explodes a huge stone with his small stone. To Roku's surprise, he is ready for this and jumps out from under the stone. But Skon uses magic and takes away the talisman and then grabs his fist because the glove has already disappeared. He tells Roku that he felt that Roku did not want to hurt him, although he said so, and considers him unworthy of the talisman, and then breaks it and puts it in his pocket. Roku tries to get up, but Roku kicks him and steps on his chest, saying that he will never become a good exorcist. He calls Roku a weakling and reminds him of what happened 2 years ago, which piques Ben's interest. Asks what happened. Skon turns around and asks doesn't she know what he did during the disaster, and she shakes her head. He burns her that Roku's hands are in blood and asks him to shut up. Skon continues saying that 2 years ago in Hina's dormitory, there was a disaster and, according to eyewitnesses from the portal, a Kiger appeared and killed all the students who lived there. The only survivors of Roku Bino are in shock because her brother, with whom they were then separated, went to that dormitory and died there from Rub Kiger. Stegansuk control over his power. Bino can't believe it and approaches Roku with pain in his eyes, asking if it's true. Roku lowers his head, unable to answer. Skon continues saying that one of his childhood friends named Yudo was Ben's brother. This information takes him by surprise because he had no idea that their lives were so closely connected. Ben clenches his teeth and asks him again about the tragedy, and finally Roku admits the truth, saying that everything he said. Skon really Ben loses his composure and pulls out a sword, pointing it at Roku, challenging him to fight. Roku does not answer and simply lowers his head, and Skon calmly lowers his hands. Bino saying that this is not all. Suddenly a sound is heard and a boy in a raincoat approaches them, calling out to Roku as if they have known Roku for a long time. He is shocked to hear his voice, and Sagan looks at him and immediately understands that this is Yudo. Yudo comes closer and takes off his cloak, revealing his blue hair and an eye patch. Bean can't say a word and tries to call his brother, but she can't utter a single sound. To Stegans above him and threatens Maeve if he moves from Stegans's place, that the wounds he received are completely healed, and that he is here to renew their friendship. This is enough for Roku, who rushes at him in a blind rage, but Yudo just snaps his fingers out on the ground. Many magical ropes appear that completely bind Roku. Sagan is surprised that Yudo did not even use a talisman for magic. He approaches Roku and begins to taunt him, saying that his friends are useless, and Roku shouts at him, asking what he did with the other guys 2 years ago. It turns out that 2 years ago, only Roku and Yudo were strong enough to participate in missions to soar and kill the Kiger, and the rest of the guys were still studying. Among them, Roku was the strongest. Yudo followed him, and everyone wanted to be just like them. One day Yudo gathered most of the guys in the room and promised that if they followed his trend they would become as strong as Roku. Everyone decided that being a Mahdi was too difficult and gathered in the room where Yudo was preparing for some kind of ritual. He closed the door and began to create his black magic. Meanwhile, Roku returned and asked the 2 girls who were downstairs where the rest were. They said that they were in Yudo's room, and Roku did not attach any importance to this. Decided to go get some pudding, but when he tried to open the door, nothing came of it. He told one of the girls about it, and then suddenly another girl who was in the hallway flew away from some mysterious force. They immediately ran after her and saw that she was lying on the floor without moving. They turned around and saw that one of the girls was crying and saying that something bad was going to happen. She told him to stop the Yudo until it was too late, and that she didn't want to become a gourd. Suddenly she began to change and turned into a huge monster right before their eyes, before they had time to come to their senses. All the dorms were filled with Kagura, who used to be her friends. Roku and the green-haired girl tried to get out, but the door was locked and one of Kaguryo and could not do anything while the girl was devoured right in front of his eyes. Watching this, Roku fell into despair, which soon grew into rage. Denio cannot believe this story. She stands and does not understand how a person can turn into Karaskin says to her that this is called the Kara corruption, and only a few who are brave enough to study the dark arts know about it. This is one of the most terrible crimes that people have committed for the sake of the power of Yuda. Use children from the hostel as experimental subjects to find out how much power he can get and how to improve the transformation. In other words, he tells her that it is not Roku who is to blame for this tragedy, and her brother Yudo Bio refuses to believe it, claiming that her brother is the kindest person she has ever met, and that he would never do such a thing, but Yudo himself intervenes and tells Bio to shut up because her voice is annoying. He states that he is tired of listening to her righteous speeches. Walls tells her that she should accept reality because Yudo, as always, deceived the people closest to him, and by nature he is a cruel and spoiled person. Bio asks if the whole time they spent together was a lie, and he finishes her off by saying that he never loved her and considered her a stupid sister who could not keep up with him, and that she is the worst thing that happened to him. Bio, stunned, and Roku is so furious that begins to tear the magic ropes with his bare hands, moving towards Yudo and telling him that no matter what he does now, he will never forgive him for what he did. Roku breaks the last row and rushes at Yudo, but suddenly his fist turns into flaming. Yudo dodges and retreats, and Sagan is shocked to see that Roku did it without a talisman. The dust clears and Sagan realizes that Roku has lost control of himself again because he is furious. His eyes turn red and he attacks Yudo, easily stops the attack without paying attention to it, and tells Roku that he has mastered this art and is in complete control of himself, unlike him, and then throws him to the wall. Roku gets up again and tries to attack, but he is thrown back again by Roku, thinking that in the third once he gets lucky and does it again, but is thrown back again. Yudo begins to enjoy this game of tennis and throws him away again, and Roku recklessly attacks him. Bio watches is from afar, unable to believe that he is so cruelly trying to hurt Roku, who lost himself in anger over the dead children. Roku gets up again and delivers an incredibly strong blow, but suddenly Benio stands between them and tries to block the blow with his sword. Roku comes to his senses seeing her but cannot stop and throw the Benio into the container. He immediately approaches her and asks how she did this, and she replies that she couldn't watch him lose control of himself. Yudo approaches Rock from behind and says that he always knew that he was strong and offering him to become his ally, promising to make him even stronger. But Rock replies that he would rather die and be at the same time with him. Yudo just grins and says that they will meet soon, and by then Rock should become stronger so that he doesn't get bored, and leaves and says Roku so that he does not follow him, and opens a portal, grabbing Maya. They pass through the portal to the real world, and Skin takes Mayu, and Ben immediately falls to his knees in front of him and begs him to forgive him for the pain that her brother has caused him all these years. Horn tells her not to blame herself, it was his fault too. He says that he lived with Yudo for many years and should have known his true essence. According to him, Mickey tracked down Yudo 2 years ago and none of this would have happened to him. Continues saying that he understood one thing: he avoided battles because it hurts him to remember what happened 2 years ago, but because of this, he did not become stronger and remain the same as 2 years ago. He gets up and promises that he will become stronger and defeat Yudo, and Ben also gets up and says that he wants to become stronger with him in order to also bring his brother to justice. Several days have passed and Roku stands in front of the mirror and remembers how they came to Saga Nu and asked him to train them, but he said that he did not have time and left, having returned the talisman to Roku. Suddenly Bani comes into the bathroom and tells him to clean up because she needs to use the toilet. Later, Roku enters the living room and sees beautiful middle-aged woman sitting on the sofa surrounded by flowers. Denio also comes down and immediately recognizes her before saying hello. She says that this is Sura, one of the 12 guardians and her teacher. Then another strange man appears who looks like a cat named Tata, also one of the 12 guardians, but little is known about him. To Roku suddenly realizes that if Suru is one of the 12 guardians, then she must be very strong, and asks her to train him so that he to become strong. Banyo follows his example and bows, begging her to train them, and to his surprise she agrees, saying that their training will begin tomorrow morning. The next morning, she sends them to a special place under the pretext of training, which turns out to be a boutique where both of them are selected for clothes. Then she turns the training into a day and makes them spend time together. It is not easy for them. And finally Charter Roku buys a lot food for Benio and she rejoices, and then they sit down by the river where they first met, and Benio eats with appetite. They were talking about life when suddenly out of nowhere Kaigermazov appear, where a huge amount of Kajero was waiting for them. Roku takes out his talisman and uses it to summon a fiery glove, and Bani uses his charms and prepares to fight anyone who gets in her way, but suddenly she notices that the lesson has problems with his hand. He falls to his knees in pain, and when Benno tries to help him he loses control and pushes her away. She dodges again and Roku struggles to pull himself together and tells Bio to run away. Bio is determined to get one of her calm talismans, which takes a lot of her strength, but it calms him down, and he can control his hand again. He is shocked that Bio was able to do it, but her strength is running out, and she falls to her knees, preparing for a battle with the Kajera, and Roku rushes forward, killing several Kajera with her wave, but Bio is too weak and falls again. Unable to defend herself, a crowd of Kajero attacks them, but Roku immediately rushes to defend Bio, hugs her tightly so that she doesn't get hurt. Suddenly several Kaigramas die behind them, but the wave of attackers does not stop, and she is forced to call for reinforcements, and then turns into Rambo, takes out a shotgun and starts shooting at everything that moves like a real crazy person, and then takes out a machine gun and arranges a real Nazi massacre. Roku notices that Tad was also attacked, but he didn't even move and all the attackers around him died. Bani tells him that no one knows what Tada is capable of and that he is very strong, mysterious even among the 12 guardians. She continues to shoot and delivers a powerful blow. It kills all the attackers. Roku and Benio, amazed by her stamina and magical abilities, she didn't even break a sweat. When they got out of the portal later that evening, Roku and Benio come back from a little date and see that the whole house has been renovated and looks like a palace. He is shocked when he sees that Sura is acting like a real mommy, and his blood pressure starts to rise and his magic wand becomes horny. Dio notices this and pushes him away, calling him a pervert. The next morning Roku is assigned to embroider along with Bino, but he failed and said that Suru is just using them. Bino tells him that she must be doing this for some reason, and then it dawns on her that she is doing this to increase her concentration because Roku loses control of his right hand again and again. Later he makes tea for Suru, who is messing around and bossing him around. He gives her tea, but she is a little naughty before taking it, and Bino runs up to her with something edible. She asks Roku to make her sash shoulders, but Roku has had enough and he yells at her to stop mocking them because he constantly remembers how weak he was recently and that he lost control of himself again and again, and Bino had to save him. Every time Sura just laughs and says that any training is useless because they can't think together. She says that as a team, they should easily understand nonverbal signals in order to be prepared for any circumstances, but they are terribly bad at understanding each other. Dino tells her that she understands Roka perfectly well, and Sura just laughs and suggests they play hide and seek. She says that if they are together, they will find where she is hiding. She will start taking them seriously and will conduct training with them. And they immediately agree because Roku thinks that finding a person like her who is trying to hide especially is such a huge dress should be very easy. She starts the countdown, and while she is standing there they cannot find her, but as soon as the countdown ends she just disappears. They start looking for her everywhere, but cannot find her because she is not hiding anywhere. Ben calls Roku, who runs up to him and sees that she sits in her room with a magazine that he thinks belongs to his girlfriend. Den is angry with him, but then they find a note from Suru, which says that they should always use incognito mode and that she went outside. He runs out after Ben, but after a while he stops and begins to think where the hell he is running. Den calls him an idiot, and then they hear two girls talking about a beautiful woman in a dress. He immediately asks where they saw her, and they show him to the cafe. They come to the cafe and see their new girl, but Banyo notices a lipstick mark on the cup and realizes that she must have been here. Roku asks the waitress where the girl went, and she replies that she went to a clothing store. They immediately head to the nearest clothing store where the store owner tells them that they just missed her because she went to an antique store. They run to the antique store where they find out that she is hungry and went to a restaurant, and they have to go there in the restaurant. The waiter asks if they are friends with Sura and starts chatting with them, but Roku gets angry and asks him to shut up. The waiter replies that she ate a lot of food and said that soon her friends will come who will pay. They leave the restaurant and the lesson runs out of money. Roku was about to stop searching and admit defeat, but Benio says that they can't do this, and if they want to find Sura, they should think about what she would do in their place. Denio thinks that she could go to fitness classes because she wanted to lose weight, and Roku agrees with this. They both quickly run to fitness classes Zumbo, where they finally notice a girl who they think looks like Sura. But it turns out that it is Tode in a wig. She gives them a note saying that she is their guest was nice, but unfortunately, They were mistaken. They leave the building and suddenly everything around turns red and they realize that somewhere nearby there must be a Kager. Benya immediately opens a portal and they both go through it preparing for battle. Cannot find the monster. Suddenly two huge chemical creatures attack them, but they manage to dodge. Kagura turns out to be a giant octopus that has appeared in many of my nightly videos. Rock doesn't like this ugly underscore, though he immediately grabs the stones and enchants them before throwing it at the monster. But the soft body repels all his attacks without leaving a scratch. Nio immediately snatches the swords and tries to use his special blade dance technique to cut the monster. But the attacks do not cause any harm to his thick body. Suddenly, the octopus releases a huge cloud of smoke that envelops the entire area and separates Ben and Roku. They try to call each other, but cannot find the way. Octopus spreads and attacks Nio and Roku. But they are both very quickly dodges the attacks and Roku takes out his talisman, but immediately puts it away. For fear of hurting Nio or losing control of his hand, Nio also holds back his attacks fearing that he might harm Roku before they have time to think of something. The monster attacks Ben again, and although she dodges the first blow, she is touched by the second tentacle and she flies off to the wall. Roku tries to get to it but barely manages to dodge the attack and Ben falls to the ground again. Gets up and realizes that she doesn't need to predict the monster's movement, but needs to watch where Roku is moving so that they can synchronize their attacks. Roku thinks the same thing and finally they synchronize, preparing to attack. The octopus attacks them both and Roku decides to attack using the glove to fight off the octopus's tentacles. And Ben predicts this and immediately rushes forward to destroy the tentacles. Soon they both rush at the octopus and joining forces and whole completely destroying it. Suddenly, they hear someone clapping their hands. They turn around and see Sura on the roof of the building next to the herd. She congratulates them on their teamwork, says that they have improved a lot and that this time Roku was not just angry but was able to completely control his hand. They rejoice at the victory and then they turn to the Suber and say that the game is not over yet, which means they won because they found her. Sura sighs and disappears, leaving them to celebrate the victory. The next day she leaves with to do and on her way out she passes the note to Bean who reads it, gets angry, and then goes to Roku's room and finds another nature magazine, after which he throws away all the magazines. Several days pass without incident. Roku trains hard trying to give his best. He realizes that his strength has increased significantly when he uses his punch to extinguish the flame and thinks that he has lost control and never wants to hurt Bani again. He then decides to try to use his body strength and strikes, but make sure that the flame does not go out. He does this for each remaining candle and, when he finishes, he thinks about how to defeat Yudo, but he understands that he cannot defeat Yudo simply by restraining his power and controlling everything. To defeat Yudo, he must use all his strength without holding back and maintaining control. He decides that now there is no point in thinking about this problem, and having finished his business he returns home. There he sees the smoke is pouring out of the kitchen. He runs in and sees that Benno is preparing something in a huge pan and the smell is like she's working at a nuclear power plant. He asks what she's cooking and she replies that she decided to cook a healthy lunch of vegetables, sardines, tuna steaks, peas and other hellish things. He says that it's underscore and that she shouldn't cook anymore. Mina doesn't pay attention to him and says that the dish is ready. Roku refuses to eat and she shows him a glass of blacker and she cooks every day to be healthy. She says she cooked and for him, but Roku still doesn't want to drink it. Benny shows him he needs to drink and drinks a glass in one gulp as if it were pumpkin juice. Colin Roku beta male Roku of course can't leave it like that and also drinks a glass in one gulp, but the juice turns out to be so bitter and disgusting that he rolls on the floor and swears. He gets up and says that she is an idiot and that Gordon Ramsay will feel bad if she cooks. She gets angry and asks if he knows how and he, of course, answers that he knows how to cook very well. She looks at him with a smirk and says that if he is so confident in himself, then let him cook something. He accepts the challenge and says that from now on they will cook in turns. She will cook lunch and he will cook dinner. But they discover that his strap is much better than that of Benya, who does not want to cook at all. She agrees, but warns that in the evening, she will go to work part-time. While Roku will cook, she leaves the house and runs along the river, thinking about home-cooked food and sees how mother and daughter return home with shopping to cook dinner. She remembers how her mom asked her dad what he wanted for dinner. Even when they were fighting a giant Kilogram, they were one of the strongest exorcists and always worked together to defeat Kilogram. They just cast their spells and attacked Kilogram, and with one blow they destroyed his shock and all the exorcists in the area, and Banyo was simply praised and told that she wants to become the same when she grows up. Meanwhile, Roku prepares dinner using the entire kitchen and everything that comes to hand to cook the best dish that she ever try. He gets distracted and sets something on fire, but then he settles everything and ends up cooking one portion of fried rice with an egg and throws a mountain of dishes into the sink to be washed by the dishwasher. "I'm killing women." He looks around and realizes that Bio hasn't gone out for a run in a long time and begins to worry. Meanwhile, Bio comes to her senses when Kema says that they should probably go home because it's getting dark, but Benya isn't into it, in the mood to communicate, and continues to run in the same direction. Suddenly, they feel that something is wrong and she stops, and Ken begins to tremble when he says that he feels the presence of Kagura very close to them, and she is very big. Without hesitation, Ben replies that she will destroy her right away. Some time later, Roku comes running with food because he was afraid that she would cool down. He looks around in search of Bai, wondering where she could have gone, and suddenly the thought occurs to him that she could go kill Kero alone, and this happens inside the portal. Standing Bima is holding swords in her hands, and Kina seems even scared of the huge monsters in front of her. But she doesn't pay attention to them, and as soon as the colossal titan tries to grab her, she jumps away and decides to deal with him with one blow. But to her surprise, Kagura explodes and a man comes out of her and throws her to the ground. He asks if she is an exorcist and approaches her. She looks at him, and he looks like a strange mixture of a man and a Kagura with a golden eye. The guy asks if she knows where to find her. Gemini exorcists and says that he doesn't have much time. He says that if she doesn't know or knows but doesn't want to talk, he will kill her. But if she tells him, he might leave her alive. He lists the options and says that he will count to 10 and will wait for an answer and then kill her so that she doesn't say. He starts counting and immediately remembers how she was little when her parents were killed by this monster, who then also offered her the choice to save her father or mother. She gets up on her feet, takes the swords and is angry, shouts out his name, which shocks the monster named Kamui, who asks how she knows him. She doesn't answer and immediately attacks him, but he easily dodges and she runs as fast as she can, trying to strike. Ken asks doesn't he think about the people he killed. She tries to find a gap in his defense and asks if he remembers a couple of exorcists he killed 6 years ago. He answers, and this makes her even more angry. She rushes to attack again. To her horror, he just lightly hits the sword and it breaks, and then uses magic to break her leg and knock her to the ground. He walks up to her and says he doesn't remember how many insects he squashed before giving her a powerful kick to the face that broke her armor and knocked her off. He walks up to her as she lays still on the ground and asks has she lived her whole life with the idea of getting revenge on him for killing her parents. If so, then it was a pathetic display of her power. He walks up and puts her feet on her head and then asks how she would like to die. He uses 2 of her auction, saying that she can neither die crushed like her parents or he can smash her head on the ground. Then he says that she has 10 seconds. After thinking, he begins the countdown and she remembers how she promised at their funeral that one day she will take revenge for them, and begins to cry from helplessness and despair, while To Whom Man thinks she feels completely useless because she could not do anything right, and To Whom Man is already finishing the report when suddenly the rock receives a powerful blow that throws to the side. He counts Bino for the fact that she is so reckless and is trying to cope with the Kiger Mazov alone, and heads towards them, declaring that he will kill them right away. But fortunately, one of the rams and the Kiger attacks Kamui, and this gives Rock time to escape with Bin to a safe place. He immediately treats her wounds and says that they need to go back and report everything to the authorities. But Ben is very emotional and tells Rock how her parents died because of this idiot.